Mic check 1 2. Mic check. Testing, testing, testing. All right, hey guys, what's up? Been a while, I've done one of these, but here we are talking about college baseball. I'm gonna show you guys how to, and gals. I'm sorry, I'm making assumptions here, but anyways, love to see how. I'll show you guys how to basically create a rating in college baseball with the teams in the tournament, and then go from there to then simulate the regionals and create a model where not necessarily a model, but create a simulation where then you can say, hey, here's the numbers and here's how we're gonna do things. So let's get started. We'll get started in beautiful R. And make sure I have the chat up, just in case if anybody has questions. Alright, so we're going to have one library and one library only, tidyverse, and then I'll have it, so when I post this to GitHub, I'll have this ready to go in here for you, but I have a CSV file of ratings, and I'll show you, I'll link in the, I'll put it in the chat below, where I got these ratings. So, here in the chat, where I got SOS, strength of schedule, and then RPI. I used adjusted RPI value for this one. So where I got strength of schedule and RPI. So we see we have the regional, we have the team, what conference they're in, what seed they are. They're a national seed. Strength of schedule, RPI. G is run differential per game. Now we can use it. I'm going to show you like different ways. Again, this is more up to you how you want to use what numbers are available to you and how you can create a rating. So we'll get started by simply just creating the rating. Or excuse me, we're going to add a mutate function, and we're going to add win percentage. And we're just going to say round wins divided by games 3. And so for some it might not add up. That's fine. Mainly because ties are not included in here. So I know some teams had ties here and there. But anyways, moral of the story. Here's your winning percentage. And so now we're going to create a function called power rating. Power underscore rating function. And let's make it 3 arguments. So we'll do run differential per game, RPI, and strength of schedule. Or win percentage, sorry. Win percentage, RDG, RPI, excuse me, and strength of schedule. And now you can use these numbers how you want, create a weighted system. We'll do like a weighted rating, if you will. Putting more weight on strength of schedule, a little bit lesser weight on RPI, but the lowest weight is on win percentage. And the reason why we come to that conclusion is if you put equal weight on all 3 of these, teams that have won a lot of games in less powerful conferences, something that strength of schedule and RPI tries to solve in some way, then teams that have a lot of wins in mid-major conferences are going to be viewed very highly. So, like a Louisiana Tech, a Dallas Baptist, and East Carolina. Not to say that they're bad teams by any means. They're in here for a reason. But it maybe gives them a little bit too much credit for the competition that they've played, because when you obviously compare something like the Conference USA to something like the SEC, like that's going to be a big difference there. So we can do this. So we can say rating equals win percentage, and we'll give that a 0.1 rating. So, or a 0.1 weight. So we're going to have all these weights add up to 1. And again, it's up to you. It really is up to you. What do you want to use for weights? Mess around with some. Feel free to play around with some. Whatever you want. And then we'll say RPI times 0.3. Or no, excuse me. Yeah, 0.3. And then SOS times 0.5. So the strength of your schedule has the most weight at, we'll say 50%. RPI is 30%. Actually, no. We'll make RPI 4. Nah, and you know what? We're going to do a strength schedule 60%, RPI 30%, and then your win percentage at 10%. And we're going to return that rating. And then we're going to add that into our data frame. And so since this is a function that requires to go by row, we have to turn our data frame into a row-wise data frame. So we just use a row-wise function. And then we can say mutate rating equals power rating, win percentage equals win percentage, RPI equals RPI, and then SOS equals SOS. And then to get it out of a row-wise data frame, you'll ungroup it. So let's run our power rating, ratings. You go here, and you can see here, based on how much weight we put on strength of schedule, Kentucky has the highest rating. Now again, if you think otherwise, then make some adjustments. If you think that Tennessee should have the highest rating, then make some adjustments. Maybe put a little bit more weight on win percentage, or a little bit more weight on RPI. Again, the choice is yours for what you want to do here. If you want to not even use RPI at all, then don't. You don't have to. So anyways, now that we have these ratings, we can see it's scaled from 0.44 to 0.6 something. You can create a rating system there. So then we're going to create a function called SimGame. And we'll just say function T1 and T2. And that's just short for Team 1, Team 2. So, and then here we're going to say P1, which is ratings, and then dplyr filter, team equals T1, and then we'll say dplyr pull that rating. And then P2, ratings, dplyr filter, team equals T2, dplyr pull rating. And then now we can just get our probability, which is P1 divided by P1 plus P2. And then take that, so T1, T2, create a sample where we take those probabilities and say, hey, who's going to win that game? So prob, and then 1 minus the probability. And again, we just want one sample of that game. So this function allows you to basically put two teams that, in a given bracket and run it however you want. So now we'll have sim region. we'll say function. We'll call this region name. So that way you can simulate the Knoxville region, the Fayetteville region, Bryant College Station region, Lexington region, so on and so forth. So we'll call this region teams, and we'll say ratings filter regional equals region name. So that way you can filter down your data set based upon that region. And then within that, we'll get our seedings. So we'll say team 1, region teams, dplyr filter, seed equals 1, and then pull our team. So basically just pull the name of the team. Now I'm not going to type this out 3 more times. I'm just going to copy and paste. Change it to where it's the 2nd seed, the 3rd seed, the 4th seed. 2, 3, 4. Alright. Now we can create basically our bracket with the 4 teams, right? We can do a 1v4 seed here. So game 1, I should say game 1. Use that function that we created earlier, sim game. And we can say team 1, team 4. And then 2v3 seed, game 2, sim game, team 2, team 3. And then winners, winners bracket, game 1, game 3, sim game. Now we just take game 1 and game 2. Then when you get to losers bracket, we're going to have to use a function called setDiff. And what setDiff does is basically take that result from game 1 and game 2, knowing who won, take the opposite. So, for example, if you have, let's say in the, let me think of a regional here where we could do it. We'll just say Athens regional. Let's say Georgia and Georgia Tech win that first game. Then, using setDiff, they say, okay, Georgia Tech won that first game. That means UNCW and Army West Point will be the other 2 teams. So how do you do that? Well, first, create a set where it's losers 1. And we'll say setDiff. And we'll say combine all 4 teams. And then combine the first 2 games. Basically, again, saying, look at the 4 teams, look at the winners of the 2 games, take the opposite. Game 4, we'll do sim game, losers 1, 1, and then losers 1, 2. So that way we have that 4th game. Then once you get to the other side of the losers bracket, so I'll say losers bracket game 1. Now we'll say losers bracket game 2. So now we'll take the difference from the first 3 games and set that difference too. So we'll say combine, setDiff, combine again those first 2 games, and then the loser of game 3 as well as game 4. So then game 5 is sim game, losers 2, 1, and then losers 2, 2. And then for now that we get to the championship game, part 1, we can say game 6, sim game, game 3, game 5. And have both of those. And if it's an if necessary game, here's what you can do. You can say if game 6 does not equal game 3. Basically, the team that is going to game 3 are both 1-0. And so if they win that game and then they win game 6, they're the champion. But if they don't match, then obviously it goes to a game 7. And then we can say champion, we'll call it sim game, game 3, game 6. And we say else champion is game 6. So, I mean, if you win game 6 and you're unbeaten, then you're going to the Supers. And then we'll return champion. Alright, so let's give a test run. So we'll say sim region, and we'll use Knoxville as an example. It seems like error region teams not found. So what I did here, added an S when I wasn't supposed to. There you go, sim region. The first one, Northern Kentucky. How about that? Now, but that's just one sim. You obviously want to use more than one sim. So if you just take one sim, you're inviting yourself for variance in that regard. So so the question is, Robert, how do you sim regions with multiple simulations? Well, let me show you. First, let's get the unique region. So unique ratings, $ regional. Then we're pulling that column. We can see that there are 16 regions, all in caps. And then we're going to take a sim function and go function region n sims, and that's where we're going to create those number of simulations. So then we'll say, I'll just call this TT. Call it whatever you want. You can call it, final sims, or say TT. We're going to use the replicate function, and n is how many times you replicate a certain function, in this case, sim region. But to make it dynamic, since we're still within a function, we'll use that n sims and say, hey, I want to simulate this regional 1,000 times to 10,000 times, etc., so on and so forth. And we'll say, but then what function do we want to repeat? And it's sim region. And we'll say region name equals RGN. So that way it pulls that region. Then we want to convert that into a data frame, so use Tibble, and we'll say rename winner equals 1, so change the first name column name to winner. Then we'll group by that winner. Summarize wins equals n, and we'll ungroup the data frame. So what n is doing is basically saying, okay, for Tennessee, if you run it 100 times, you see Tennessee's name 50 times, that's how many times they won that region. Ungroup, and then you can say mutate win percentage equals 100 times round wins divided by n sims 3, and then region equals RGN, just to make sure we have the region. And then we'll say select region, winner, win percentage. Then we want to arrange our data frame by whoever won the most times to whoever won the fewest times. And then we'll say TT. Basically to say return. So let me make it a little bit more clear. So we're returning that data frame we called TT. Now you can, again, call it whatever you want. In this case, I just called it TT for time's sake. So now, how do you go through all 16 regions and run a simulation? Pretty simple. You can use the per function or per package, and use map to map your function and be able to create that. So there's a few different ways you can do it. This is the one that I've gotten used to over time. So 1 to length regions, basically saying going from the Knoxville region all the way to the last regional, which I believe is the East Carolina one. Anyways, so you go from 1 to 16, and then you're going to say per map function X, and then we'll say sim function, because that's the function we just created, and then say RGNs X, because what we're doing is taking each region that we created, going from X to match those regions. So region 1 is Knoxville, region 2 is Lexington, so on and so forth. And let's say, just for example's sake, run it 100 times, but I would recommend you run it at least 1,000 times. But for this example, so it's that way it saves time, we'll just run it 100 times. And then I like to add .progress equals true, so you can kind of see how that is going. So now you run it, close to a minute overall, but it's going through each region, running that simulate region 100 times, because that's what NSIMS, that's what we accounted for here in NSIMS. Again, this is just for example's sake. I would highly recommend you run it at least 1,000 times or 10,000 times, because if you run it 100 times, you're going to get a lot of volatility. Then last but not least, so we call this DAT, which is in a list, but we obviously want it in a data frame. So we'll just call this DF, DAT, piping operator. We'll bind those rows. So, boom. And there you go. So now you have every team's winning percentage. Now, it may not add up to 100 because the way it's rounded, but it gives you kind of an idea. And again, make sure you run more than 100 sims. This is just a general idea of what it could look like. I'm not going to go into, what this simulation does, because again, it is up to you how you want to do it. But it gives you an idea of what region, who's going to win that region most likely, and their winning percentage based upon those sims. So that's pretty much what I have for you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. But it's going through each one and saying, okay, hey, if we simmed it 100 times, Tennessee would win 42 of them. In the Knoxville, we simmed it 100 times, Indiana State would win 28. But again, do not use 100. Use at least 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. So you can get rid of that kind of randomness. And again, for this rating, feel free to use whatever you want. Alright, if you want to use, instead of win percentage, on ratings, if you want to use run differential per game, by all means, go for it. If you want to put more weight on strength of schedule, by all means, go for it. If you want to put less weight on strength of schedule, go for it. It's whatever you want it to be. Just look at these ratings and be like, hey, do these make sense to me? And if they make sense to you, then let's tinker with it. This is just a basic example of doing it. So like if you said, you know what, instead of, we're going to add a fourth argument, and we'll say, again, we'll say RDG, run differential per game. And we'll do that. So we'll say, and let's say we just add that. We'll just make that argument 0. Make it 0 for example's sake. But actually, let me go back to the top as well, so I can make this easier on you guys as well. Is that something I definitely missed? So there's a way you can read a CSV file through GitHub without having to download the file. So I'm going to do that, show you how to do that. There you go. There's a URL. I added in my GitHub in the helper files repository ratings. And you'll still get the same thing. So there you go. And again, strength of schedule, that number came from warrennolan.com. RPI came from stats.ncaa.org. So they are publicly available information. So I'm not taking anything from anywhere. But if you want to add in RDG, great. Add in RDG. And you can say RDG times 0.1. And make these equal weight, or put more on strength of schedule. So I'll show you what that's like. Say RDG equals RDG. You can see how the ratings change. So then, like Tennessee's at the top, Texas A&M, North Carolina, it makes sense. Then you see like Wofford at the top, and if it doesn't make sense to you, obviously make some adjustments, because they have a really high run differential per game. But again, if it doesn't make sense to you, you're more than welcome to adjust it however you see fit. If you're like, you know what, I only want to make this 0.01 and basically keep this the same, where you can still add it up to 1. So I can say, you know what, this will be 0.09. So these two together would be 0.1, and then this will be 0.9. And you can still have a rating system as such. So it's whatever you want it to be, but again, make sure that these are, you sim it at least 1,000 times, 10,000 times. I would lean more towards 10,000, but at the end of the day, it's whatever you want it to be. And if you want to add other stats, by all means, add more stats. You're not limited to just RPI, strength of schedule, run differential per game, win percentage. If you want to add, ERA, go for it. Make it your thing. But in terms of what I would recommend, I would still have some form of RPI or strength of schedule in there. That way it can filter out those instances where, like, a Wofford can really pop up and say, well, we won X amount of games, we should be doing really well there. But like college baseball, the talent level is just such a big difference, whereas in pro MLB, that all those players are really good. But in college, the opposite is applied. So take strength of schedule, take RPI, one of those two, if not both. Again, make it whatever you want. Make the rating whatever you want. If you want to just use strength of schedule, just use strength of schedule. If you want to just use RPI, just use RPI. But make it in a way where it might make sense to you in some way, shape, form. But I'll be on here for a little bit longer. If anybody has some lingering questions and wants to just chat, by all means. So what I can do here is, okay, well, we'll take like this rating and say, you know what, I don't want run differential per game. I just want winning percentage. And let's say I want to make strength of schedule, very important. RPI, somewhat important. Win percentage, not as important, but still a part of it. Because this will default to 0, so if you multiply it by 0, it'll be 0. And ratings. Now we have a very interesting rating because Florida's now somehow at the top because we put a lot on strength of schedule. Maybe a little bit too much on strength of schedule. So then you say, you know what? Maybe we dial it back and say, I want 0.6 strength of schedule, I want 0.35 RPI. Now you have a different rating. Again, whatever you want it to be. In a way that makes sense to you. So then if you're like, you know what? I actually do want to use more of run differential per game. Let's put them in winning percentage at the same. And then we'll tune back RPI to 0.3. Great. Do it. Then make sure to have this be added back in. Now you have a different rating. Because personally, I think it's completely fair to say Tennessee, given all their metrics, they should have a little bit of a buffer. So this one could make a lot of sense. Not saying it will make a lot of sense, but it could. And so we can take that, run these things again. This time, let's do 1,000. So what I did was put the most weight on strength of schedule, then about half of that on RPI, and then used run differential per game and win percentage on the same level. And now it's going to take a little bit of time. Now we sit here and run it. Again, the more sims you run, the longer it's going to take. Uh, but yeah, leave a chat. Leave a chat in the. Leave a chat. Leave a comment in the chat. Let me know. Hey, who's gonna win it all here in this College World Series? I guess D1 baseball tournament. We haven't quite made the College World Series yet. So now we wait for this bad boy to run. Again, it's more sim. Hey, we're about a minute left. Less than a minute. It's going down region by region. Hey, how about it? We're done. Now we can run and look at it this way. So, based on these ratings, Texas A&M has the highest win probability of getting out of their regional. Tennessee has the second highest. Duke has the third highest. So you can see Duke and Oklahoma have the highest in their respective region. Well, again, at the end of the day, make the ratings however you want it to be. But make it however you want to be. That's a very simple way of creating a simple rating system and then using it to simulate a region to get a college or to get a team advancing to the super regionals. So, thank you so much for all that tuned in, and I hope you have a wonderful day.